people who worked for Merrick Garland and really, revered him and chose to serve him in the Department of Justice said exactly that to us, that they were disappointed that ultimately his decision to be so above reproach by appearing apolitical and not pursuing open evidence of a crime without fear or favor ended up being a political decision. Merrick Garland is a 24-year appellate court judge who had a stellar reputation as an appellate judge. Brilliant legal mind, very thoughtful, liked to call shots down the middle, careful, thorough, fairly conservative, and I don't mean politically, conservative in terms of wanting to get the law exactly right and not stretching outside any of the lines. But when he was basically blocked from becoming a nominee for the Supreme Court and getting onto the Supreme Court as President Obama had proposed, Joe Biden comes along as president and names him his new attorney general. That was because Ron Klain, Biden's chief of staff, had been a longtime friend of Merrick Garland's and thought this is a great guy with a great moderate down-the-middle resume who can restore faith in an apolitical Justice Department. But the problem was that Merrick Garland's wonderful and noble intentions ended up killing the ability to really properly hold Donald Trump to account for interfering in a federal and a free and fair election. And that's actually what was the spur for Aaron Davis, my co-author, and I to write this book. We were working on a story together at the Washington Post about a tip I had gotten that the investigation had never really gotten started under Garland at the Department of Justice, looking at this interference by Trump and his allies. And I didn't really believe it was probably true. And then we ended up confirming that they hadn't begun anything until basically the first 4 months of 2022. And the question I had, and Aaron did too, was why? Why did the Department of Justice not do what it normally does? Pursue without fear or favor. Democratic justice departments, if you will, led by Democratic appointees, have investigated and prosecuted Democrats and Republicans, prominent ones. Republican-led administrations at the Department of Justice have prosecuted and convicted prominent Democrats and Republicans. Why was Trump different?
Why?
Well, we did come to the conclusion, and our reporting reveals that 3 different times, investigators on the ground, sometimes not very prominent investigators, sometimes FBI agents, pressed from December 2020 until February 2022 for the Department of Justice to investigate Trump and his allies and what looked like a conspiracy to block Biden's victory and for Trump to hold on to power. And each of these times they were rebuffed. The rebuffing, we learned, was a mixture of things. One was primarily Merrick Garland wanting to steer away from anything that appeared political. He said privately and publicly, it is to his aides, it is not enough to be apolitical. We have to seem and appear apolitical. It ended up that the Department of Justice only began its investigation of Trump, and really they wouldn't name him as a subject. They named his campaign as a subject, but they only began it after being really humiliated and embarrassed that the Congressional House Select Committee on January 6th, news of what they were learning started to leak out, and that those leaks were very embarrassing for the Justice Department. Someone else had gotten basically the first footprints in the snow in this major crime.
Hi, I'm Pat Morrison, one of the hosts of America at a Crossroads. If you like this video, don't just watch. head over to our website where you can subscribe for early access to new programs, see our upcoming schedules, and connect directly with our guests in our weekly live streams. Thank you for watching.
You also report that there were staff people who were reluctant to move ahead because of the way that Trump had behaved toward other staff people when he found out what they were doing. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I think I understand your question, but correct me if I didn't. In the first presidency, which Aaron and I covered in real time, the first Trump presidency, we saw his efforts to manipulate the Justice Department. He wasn't exactly very secretive about it, right? He was tweeting, "We need to indict Jim Comey," or "We need to lock up Hillary Clinton," or "Michael Flynn is a good man." And covering that in real time, it was clear what Donald Trump was trying to accomplish. But what we didn't appreciate until we went back and dug deeper as book reporters was the damage and the scar tissue that Trump inflicted and left behind. He had so sort of viciously singled out individual career public servants for humiliation, for investigation. He had his congressional allies investigate certain FBI officials that were really on the ground floor of the Russia investigation. He mimicked an orgasm of an FBI official who was having an extramarital affair with an FBI lawyer on national television. And these scars went deep, and people were afraid of, especially inside the FBI, afraid of toying with Donald Trump again.
Next week, the New Yorker staff writer Susan Glasser will be here in conversation with Madeline Brand. Collapsing norms. Can American democracy survive this stress test? That's the subject. Everybody have a good night, and thanks for being with us.